I was jolted straight out of the bed. I went a foot up, and I went whack, straight back down. And I looked, and every hair on my body was going straight up. And I shouted out to Mark, who was on night watch, and as I shouted, my voice was just completely distorted, and it just was like, wow, and all the electricity in the air. So the lightning had hit the mast, it went straight down, a foot and a half from my head, hit the lightning deflector in the hull of the boat, and then dispersed through the 32 feet. So I kind of jump up and I start rambling down towards to see if Mark's okay. And on the way I see Clive, whose boat it is. And I'm just running down, and that's when the hail hit. And it was the first hit. There was just one, and then another, and then another, and another, and another. And then all of a sudden there's just these lumps the size of golf balls smashing down on the boat. And we get there, and Mark jumps down into the boat just to get away from it and basically to save himself. And we're sitting there. Well, the lightning had basically melted part of the top of the mast. It had blown all our lights out. It reversed the polarity on the battery. All the self-steering gear to make the boat go where we wanted it to go had gone. And here we are sitting down in the middle of this storm with a little 32-foot boat and no steering, no lights, and we're in the middle of the Straits of Messina, probably one of the busiest shipping lanes in the entire world. So luckily the hail kind of eases, and Mark runs up, he goes up, and as soon as he gets up, the whole boat just oars over to one side, and we're kind of thrown off, so I run up there, and I turn around, and all I see is white. And it's as if I'm looking at like an apartment complex that's just going straight by, 500 feet in front of us. And it's the Canberra cruise liner, which at that time was the second largest cruise liner in the entire world. So I look over at Mark, and his face is just ashen because he's seen all of this, and his eyes are like huge, and he doesn't actually speak a word. He cannot speak a word for the next half an hour. So Mark and I wisely had offered to crew Clive's boat. It was over in Corfu in Greece, and we were going to take it over to Spain so he could take it out of the water in the winter. And I was never, ever been to Spain, and I was like, that's going to be so cool. I've got to go to Spain. This is awesome. What could go wrong? So that next morning, we limp into Milazzo, which is this beautiful little, like, idyllic port just on the eastern tip of Sicily. And we limp in to go and get repairs and provisions. And so Clive and I walk into town, and we go into this little store. And I remember walking in and just seeing on the side there was a phone, like a payphone, the old-style payphone, and it had this wood kind of built around it, a little roof on top, as if they were like thought it was outside. And but it was like gave a little privacy. And so Clive went over and he was like, okay, I'm going to ring my folks and let them know that where we are and the fact that we've survived the storm and all is good. And so he's on the phone, and I'm pottering around there, and I just see out of the side of my eye, and then suddenly he just drops it, and it just stops and just hangs on the cord, and he bolts. And I'm like, wow, whatever he heard on that phone, that is a fight or flight reaction, and he just went. And I had a split second. It was like either talk to the person on the phone or follow him. And I was like, if somebody goes like that, you go. And I just chased after him, and he like dodged through some like patio furniture, just shot there, went across the road. I could hear the cars like squeal and avoid him, and he ran, and I just followed him there, and he jumped up over onto the seawall, and then he leapt off the seawall onto the big rocks. These were like white bleached, sun-bleached rocks that are part of the seawall on the far side. And I saw him, and then I saw him sit down, and he just crouched down and collapsed onto this rock, and he held his knees, and he ducked his head, and he just started to sob uncontrollably. And I went and sat down next to him, and I was just sitting there looking at him, and I was like, I have no idea what I can do. And I knew I just had to be there. And I looked at him, and I could see his back, and it was like heaving up, and then it would just collapse as if he was forcing every single ounce of air out of his body, and with it, forcing every piece of despair and sadness out with it. And I looked, and I'd never experienced anybody just see this kind of absolute, utter grief. And I could feel the heat like raging from his body. And I looked across, and his face was sweating, and his tears were just running down, and there was just snot, and there was like saliva, and it was just pouring off him. And he was just grunting, almost animalistic grunts. And it was just this unbelievable, like, human display of just grief. And at that time, I noticed a lady just standing over on the side. And she was an old Sicilian lady, and she was dressed in black and like had that weathered face. And she looked at me, and our eyes connected, and she looked right into my soul. And with it, she sent compassion and love and peace. And I just looked back at her, and without a word said, I was just like, thank you. And she was sending it to me and to Clive. And we just kind of sat there. And eventually he calmed and he got up and he walked to the boat. And we didn't say a word. And he didn't get onto the boat. We flew him back to England the next day. And we took the boat and we sailed it over to Malta. Goodbye to Spain. And we took it out of the water and it was later sold. The phone call, almost at exactly the same hour that we were struck by lightning, Clive's father, who he absolutely idolized, died in a drowning accident in the River Thames. And from this time, this experience, the one thing that I draw solace from was going back to that old lady's eyes and how beautiful they were, and how I know now from that experience that inside every human is this love and this compassion when you need it the most.